All right, it is 12:01 and we're going to go ahead and get started. I know this is scheduled for a long period of time, but I think Janelle's going to have a lot of information to share with all of us who are either in this caregiving role or contemplating being a caregiver, or we know someone who will be a caregiver. And I know she's going to share a lot of really valuable information. I'm going to do a really brief introduction of Janelle, and then I'll pass it on over to her. Our plan is, I guess I should touch back on the timepiece. Janelle's going to share her presentation, but we wanted to have plenty of time for people to ask questions. So as we are going through the presentation today, and Janelle can reiterate this also, if you have a question that pops up in your mind, please drop your question into the chat and we will be monitoring that, but we won't answer questions until towards the end of the presentation. So on that note, I would love to introduce you to Janelle Meintz. She is our still fairly new Somay Center coordinator here at the Somay Center for Gerontological Excellence. We are in the College of Nursing at the University of Iowa. And Janelle joined us actually in June, and she brought with her skill set of being an incredible planner and that coordinator position that she's filling, the operations position here at the Somay Center, a plethora of skills that involve dementia care. And she also has the best therapy dogs that I'll let her fill you in on. So, Janelle, on that note, I'm going to pass it over to you and let you get started.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you attending this webinar. I know just off the bat, caregiving is a really tough subject to talk about. It is a highly emotional subject. So I do want to commend you for attending a webinar, learning more education, and just getting the conversation started. And so again, we're going to be talking about holiday and caregiving and just a really quick overview of how I do some of my presentations. I'll do a quick introduction of who I am and why I'm talking to you today. And then I do want to talk a little bit about normal aging before we dive into this presentation about caregiving. I do talk a lot about dementia. It is my background, but I do want to have anyone that's attending understand that there's a lot of things that occur with normal aging and the normal trajectory, and you'll see some parallels within what I'm talking about with dementia, and it's just to try and modify and adapt for your specific situation. So we'll do a quick dementia overview, the sensory effects in the holidays, and then I always will put some different holiday tips in here, some holiday gift ideas because I'm a recreation therapist at heart, and some different resources to utilize. And I do have a lot of information in these presentations. And so if I know afterwards we'll be posting this presentation, but I can also send you an electronic copy just because there is a lot of material. So there I am. So here's an introduction on me. Again, my name is Janelle Meintz. I am a certified therapeutic recreation specialist. That's just a lot of words for helping someone overcome a barrier, and whether that be a barrier, a physical barrier, cognitive, emotional, spiritual, different barrier. That's what a recreation therapist does. They help someone try and overcome that barrier by utilizing a lot of recreation in order to do so. What I went into following my schooling was dementia care. I met someone living with dementia and wanted to know just as much as you possibly could about that person, and every person after. So I have been within dementia care and memory care for over a decade now, and end of life care has a big piece of my heart as well. Just trying to go through the navigational path of life. I am, like Jen said, I am a newer coordinator for the Somay Center. And we'll just talk about that being one of the resources that you can also utilize through the aging process. I am a therapy dog handler to two chocolate labs. Their names are Mowgli and Baloo, and they grew up within memory care with me as I was learning my role. They were learning theirs. And so they are specifically trained for the senior population and dementia in specific. And I am a proud and tired mom of two small little girls. My daughters are 4 and 2. So again, we're going to really jump right in. And I will reiterate that if you have questions, I'll do my best to answer them. But we're going to save them to the end of the presentation. But please drop them in the chat if your brain's anything like my brain. If you don't get it down right when it happens, it might, go into the abyss. So uh, we will drop those in the chat as you see necessary. But we'll start off with just talking about normal aging. And so I thought it was important to include this slide. There are a lot of different uh, avenues in which aging kind of affects a person as the lifespan continues. So physical effects that we'll talk about today also that you'll see a little bit of the parallels within dementia, but I don't want to alarm anyone. So that's also why we're having this slide. There are physical effects such as, bones losing density and leading to higher fracture risk, joint stiffening, mobility issues will arise as a person ages. There are different sensory issues. Vision and hearing gradually decline. The sense of smell becomes more and more reduced as a person ages. Taste buds change. There are some cognitive and mental effects also that are part of normal aging. That's important to note on. There are slower thought processes, memory and reasoning. We have so many neurons firing in our brains talking to one another, and the neurons also are aging. So they're not as quick as they once were, just like we're not as quick as we once were. And so that leads to some different lapses within memory and reasoning. But again, there's normal aging and there's abnormal aging. So also some different cognitive and mental effects. Reaction times start to decrease, and reflexes, coordination, and balance decrease, and that does lead to increased risk within falls. And it's just, again, kind of a prerequisite slide to the rest of our presentation here. So kind of before I start, I do want to explain a little bit about dementia. People have different varying degrees of understanding dementia. And so dementia is the title of the book, is how I like to explain it to people. So you go into a library and you pull out a book, and the title again is dementia. You open up the first couple of pages, and one of the first pages is a table of contents. On that table of contents is all the different types of dementia. And so that's where you'll find Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, frontotemporal, and so on. And so I have a lot of people that will ask, well, my loved one doesn't have dementia, they have Alzheimer's. And the next slide will kind of show, that dementia is more of an umbrella term, but some people, this resonates a little bit more with them, that dementia is the title and the types of dementia are the different chapters. So with our dementia overview, again, when I talk about the umbrella, but dementia is really a group of symptoms. They're caused by so many different types of diseases. And it is truly a collection of symptoms that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. And when we're talking about normal aging and talking about dementia, it's really important to really hone in on these symptoms are occurring to someone living with dementia every single day. They are severe enough to interfere with their actions of everyday life. This is not a one-off situation or, being overwhelmed in group situations, especially around the holidays. You have more and more people that you don't necessarily see as much throughout the year, and it kind of creates a spotlight on some people. So just keeping this in mind that there are, normal aging and then abnormal aging changes that you can see. And if you have any questions, I will always say, specifically write them down and talk to your primary care physician about any of those changes or worries that you're seeing in yourself or, a close loved one. So just a really quick, like to talk about the differing types of dementia. So there's so many different types of diseases that cause those symptoms that are sitting in that yellow box there. But the different types of dementia that we talk about medically and professionally are about 12 different types of dementia. The first being Alzheimer's disease, which is the most well known, and it's the most prevalent. So 60 to 80% of people diagnosed with dementia will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. It is a slow and steady decline of a person's cognition, and it will, most of the time affect physical aspects of a person. Um, and it all kind of differs. That person's specific navigation and journey. Alzheimer's disease is, again, that slow and steady decline. It could take anywhere from the onset of symptoms that are, visible symptoms that someone is seeing because there's a lot that's changing within the brain way before outward symptoms occur. But those outward symptoms, anywhere from 3 years to about 20 years can be the entire span of someone's life that is living with dementia, and Alzheimer's disease in specific. And it is that slow and steady decline. So even when things might feel like they're plateauing or not getting worse or even getting better, that's not the case. It is always in a decline. With Alzheimer's disease, there are um, some physical aspects of the brain called plaques and tangles, and so that those differing types of those plaques and tangles in the brain will actually be a diagnosis point. And it's not 100% a diagnosis until autopsy at this point, but researchers are getting closer with PET scans and the different alleles that they can find within blood work, even. Vascular dementia. I like to talk about this one next. This is a series of strokes within the brain or the inoxygenation of the blood to getting to different points of the brain. And so those may be caused by strokes, mini strokes, or TIAs. They may be caused by a large, brain blockage. It could also be chronic illness and diseases. We're a lot of the time looking more into what's happening with blood pressure and hypertension and the causes, what could happen to someone later down the line with experiencing cognitive impairment. Vascular dementia is different than Alzheimer's disease in that it is the trajectory of that disease process is more like stairs. So it will start in almost a plateau, and a person can have, that cerebral vascular accident of sorts, and cognition will decline. And then they may plateau for a little while until the next event occurs and they'll decline. And it's almost like someone's walking downstairs in order to, when you look at the entirety of that disease progression. Um, that being said, with vascular dementia, it's very difficult. And I know this personally. My uncle died of vascular dementia back in 2022. There's these points of plateau that you are thinking, the person's not getting worse or maybe they're getting better. And so, especially around the holidays, you'll get a lot of family uh, chitter chatter, and you'll start to kind of take note. And my entirety of bringing this up is to, if you have concerns, again, talk to your primary care physician, write things down, track things. You'll hear me say that throughout the presentation, but don't doubt yourself as a caregiver. Um, Another type of dementia that I like to talk about is dementia with Lewy body, and I like to talk about that when I talk about Parkinson's disease dementia. They're completely different types of diseases, but the trajectory of those diseases in the middle to late stages will almost mimic one another. So, dementia with Lewy body will start out more as a cognitive impairment that a person will start seeing those symptoms of cognitive impairment. A lot of the times, those are plagued by hallucinations and delusions, and hallucinations and delusions will impact you know, many differing types of dementia, but it's pretty apparent within dementia with Lewy body. They are, having hallucinations and delusions throughout the entire day. Hallucinations and delusions are things that a person perceives to be completely real to them. Hallucinations in itself they affect all of the senses. So someone may hear something that's, not there, see something, feel something, smell something, taste something that is not there. Delusions is, again, someone completely believes this. Maybe it's a story in their mind, but it's completely real to them. It's their reality. And so with hallucinations and delusions, it's really important to, again, track those different things that are going on and track what can make that person more at ease and less stressed out about those plagues that they're constantly, having throughout their day. With dementia with Lewy body, again, it starts more with the cognitive impairment that you see first, but then as the disease progresses, you start to see some of those Parkinsonisms, and that could be anything from tremors and rigidity to loss of muscular control of the body. It can affect the way someone is able to um, un enunciate and speak up. It affects, the lungs, the capacity of all of those muscles. And so dementia with Lewy body again starts cognitive, and then you'll start to see some of the physical symptoms. With Parkinson's disease dementia, those are completely flip-flopped. And so with Parkinson's disease dementia, a person does have to have a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. Not everyone that is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease will develop Parkinson's disease dementia, but it is a staggering number. I believe it increased from to 60 to 80% of people diagnosed with Parkinson's disease may develop dementia. And that could be anywhere from a year after physical symptoms begin to about 10 years. A person can be living with Parkinson's disease and develop a cognitive impairment on top of that. Um, Mixed dementia can be a mixture of two different types of dementia. So it wasn't until, again, autopsy with my uncle that we realized that he not only had vascular dementia, but he also had plaques and tangles in his brain, which led the forensic pathologist to also diagnose with Alzheimer's disease. Frontal temporal dementia occurs in the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. And a lot of times that will affect a person's personality first. These are the cases where people are saying things that don't align with them morally, ethically, who they've always been. That could be, dad's making these crazy purchases and he's always been a penny pincher. I'm not really sure why he bought, a $30,000 car just on a whim. Um, these types of situations, a lot of people will believe that their loved one is going through a midlife crisis a lot of the times, if they're acting completely out of, alignment of who they've always been. But with frontal temporal dementia, it goes, further. Obviously, there's a lot of chemical changes going on in the brain, a lot of destruction in the brain. And so frontal temporal dementia can also affect a person socially. So those social barriers and filters dissipate. They're no longer intact, which can make things uncomfortable for other people because they don't have those boundaries or those filters. They may say harmful things to a person that they don't necessarily mean to say or ever would want to say to that person. Um, Also with frontal temporal dementia, there's an obsessive compulsive portion. And I should say frontal temporal dementia is it's almost a scale or a spectrum. So there's differing types of frontal temporal dementia in that the one that I'm talking about with obsessive compulsive tendencies may not be what every person living with frontal temporal dementia may be experiencing. But you'll see with certain people experiencing some of those obsessive or compulsive tendencies, overeating could be a part of that. Wandering, walking constantly. I had a gentleman that he would walk so much he burned holes on the bottom of his shoes. Also had another person that, I was eating a sandwich at my desk and he reached over and ate it out of my hands, just because those barriers and those filters just aren't there any longer. Um, and then at the very bottom there, I have a couple of different types of the types of dementia. Huntington's disease, it's the only 100% genetic componentry of, dementia, and that is generation to generation wise. Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome is a thiamine deficiency, and a lot of people will also talk about alcohol abuse when they talk about Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is a prion disorder, and it used to, back in the day, be called mad cow disease. And normal pressure hydrocephalus, we're seeing a lot more, and it's an accumulation of fluid on the back of the brain that adheres to different functioning, and it changes. So it's almost like a teeter-totter. So picture the middle of the teeter-totter, the back of your brain, and the fluid can accumulate on either side and kind of push and flood those areas, which makes them, not able to be used. So some of the different symptoms that a person can be experiencing within dementia in general is memory issues. And so short-term is affected first. Immediate recall is, forgotten first. Long-term memories are mostly stored within the brain until those are affected by the disease process as well. Judgment, poor decision making. Again, those choices don't align with their morals, ethics, what they've always done, or their routines. So my aunt is currently living with Alzheimer's disease, and I always, talk about this story. She was earlier in her disease process, and she, you know, has had the same stove for 15, 20 years, has a glass top on it. She's living at home with my uncle, and she goes to clean the stove top. Granted, she had just finished cooking. So she took the pot off. She said she put it on a oven mitt, knowing that that was hot. She sprayed the stove top. She saw the steam come up. She mentioned it to my uncle, who was at the time reading the paper and not really thinking anything of it. And without taking even a paper towel in her hand, she stuck her hand directly onto that stove top to try and clean it. And it took longer than it would for a cognitively sound person to remove her hand off. But immediately, not understanding what just happened or why those certain steps were not included in on a task that she had done countless times before, is an example of, that judgment and decision making being affected. Poor impulse control, again, a person's actions or behaviors, I'll always put those in quotes because there's a reason why someone is exhibiting a behavior or an emotion. It's due to an unmet need, whether that be an unmet physical need or an unmet emotional need. They're not able to get that out. And so you'll see a lot of people talking about the different behaviors with dementia. And again, there's always an unmet need that needs to be um, cared cared to in those instances. Impulse control, again, with those social cues. Cognition, a person can get lost in place and time. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to someone, one thing that I'll try and ask is, do you know what year it is? And then see what their response is. Maybe you can help pinpoint kind of where they're at in their lifespan if you ask them what year it is. I do that often. I get anything from 2024 to, 1968. And then I can kind of figure out where they're living in their world and how I can best support them within that role instead of trying to bring them back to my reality, which is not their reality any longer. Communication, word finding is affected, vocabulary, comprehension. This one's big. We have an auditory processing center that's just right above our ears. So it's not like the person has, a far way to go from the words coming into their ears, but to process it is just right above it. But with dementia and honestly through normal aging, hearing is affected. And the difference between normal aging and abnormal aging within dementia is that a lot of that comprehension is lost. So those words aren't understood. It's not that they're not heard, but they're not understood. Um, and then there's a lot of different sensory changes that we'll go through, but visual, spatial, verbal, physical reactions and abilities are all affected. So I do want to point out that everyone's different. Just like we all have different fingerprints, every single person is different. And that is in aging. But within dementia, someone could have the same, they can be the same age, they can have the same socioeconomic background, same education, same gender, same, everything, but their dementia will be completely different from someone else's. Someone's aging journey will be completely different from another person's aging journey. Although it may follow, a rough outline, it is going to be different. So we'll jump into the sensory effects and the holidays. The first one that we'll talk about is vision. And so with vision, uh, there are different effects that occur. Um, the first one would be that a person living with dementia needs 3 times as much light to see as a cognitively sound person. This one changed my thought process because I was always, when I left a room, almost hear my mom in my head, like, turn off the lights. Um, and I would turn off the light as I left a room. But knowing, especially, now in the winter time where fall, winter, where it gets dark around, exactly 5 p.m., um, a person can maybe leave a room and turn the light off. And when they come back, maybe after dinner or something, they go back in and it's a completely different space. It's completely disorienting. And it would be like going into a regular room in your house, but then putting a pair of sunglasses on and seeing, how much light can you actually see? Different areas, different places within the occipital lobe, which is where your vision is housed. It actually affects your visual field. So it can create holes in your vision. So that top picture there is something that a person living with dementia can see. There's little black marks all over the place, or there's a giant hole in their vision. And it's incredible because you can take someone to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor can evaluate their eyes and say that, it's their eyes check out. There is nothing in their visual field, but it's the interpretation of the brain has within that visual field that is also actually altering that person's vision. So I had a person that had they could only see out of one eye at a time for a length of period. And so she would kind of hold one eye closed. It was more helpful for her, but then, maybe the next day she would close her other eye. It's also, affected difficulty recognizing objects. Again, think about dimming the lights and going into an area where you now don't recognize things as you once did, or you have these black marks, all over your visual field. I also like to talk to people about the binocular system. And so if you want to in your own space today, you can put your thumbs on top of your fingers on both of your hands and put them together like little binoculars. And what you do is you try to create them as tight as you possibly can, so there's not a lot of spaces in between your fingers. You put them up to your eyes and you try and see what you can all see from your visual field from this point of view, and take into effect that a lot of people, as they age, they have differing abilities within their neck muscles, their backs, their ability to turn their head and swivel up and down. And so when you are needing to look down to see if you're going to trip over something, a lot of the times a person isn't going to be able to turn their head all the way. They'll look down, but they can only see darkness. Um, and so the binocular effect is just a helpful way. Sometimes I'll even scan a room within the binocular effect of what can I see, what can't I see within this room. So to consider modifying for your visual field, having lights on, avoid that, you know, the need to dim those lights. In the uh, space within dining, using plates in contrasting colors to the tablecloth and placemat. I had um, a, a woman that, she wouldn't touch her food, and trying to figure out what was going on. The placemat was the exact, or I'm sorry, the tablecloth was the exact same color as the plate, which were just white, and the food was sitting on top, and she wouldn't eat them. She thought they were radioactive, they were floating. She didn't understand that they were sitting on the plate that was sitting on the table on top of the tablecloth. She just saw her food, didn't understand the depth perception, and that it was actually sitting on something and wouldn't eat it, and convinced everyone at her table also that they would be radioactive if they ate their food. So that was a fun one. Um, so also moving the plate to the center, think about the binocular effects again. You're sitting with the plate directly in front of you, and a person looks down, and what do they see? Nothing. So maybe they're going to start eating things across the table from them instead, because it's what they can visually see. So maybe pushing the plate up to the middle of the table and see if that helps if someone's not eating. You want to try and avoid that blind spot. Avoid decor resembling food and candy items. Um, you won't know if a person will eat those things until they do, and it can become a choking hazard. I've seen teeth break with different things getting put into the mouth, and at no fault of their own. Uh, and then just consider, Christmas lights that are constantly blinking. It is a huge attention grabber for someone living with dementia. They might see it in their visual field and continue to turn and look to see what that blinking is and not store it in their brain. They don't have that capacity anymore to store it in their brain and know that that's a blinking light. It's not something coming at me. Um, you know, that's okay. It's going to continue to do that. They don't have that ability to do that any longer. Hearing, again, hearing's affected. This is uh, this is something that took me a little bit to kind of understand was that certain sounds are amplified for a person living with dementia, and it differs per person. Certain sounds, so what I hear is not necessarily what a person living with dementia hears, and it is all within that auditory understanding of those different sounds. So certain things are amplified. If someone closes the door and it is a nice, close door sound to it. Someone living with dementia might get that same closed door sound, but amplified about 10 times to sound almost like cymbals going off behind them. You'll see people, and that's a normal aging trajectory as well. Some different decibel levels are amplified or dulled, but you'll see a lot of times people will, get extremely frightened for something that, a cognitively sound person can kind of put off to the side and understand, okay, that was a loud noise and I can refocus. Someone living with dementia, they kind of hit that fight or flight and they'll stay there for a little while. It takes 3 times as long for someone to get back down to a baseline. From that fight or flight point in time. So those certain sounds are amplified. It is hard to keep track of conversations. A person cannot locate voices, who's talking, where is certain sounds coming from? Are they talking to me? Do I need to answer? There's so much that goes into those conversations, especially at a dinner table, especially around people that you don't see on a daily basis. And that was the first thing that we realized something was going on with my uncle, in that we are all sitting at our big, loud Italian family, Sunday pasta dinner. Excuse me. And everyone was talking, which they always do, all at the same time. And my uncle was usually in a bunch of different conversations all at the same time, answering a question here, then chiming into another conversation. And one of the Sundays, he just, sat there and kind of pushed his food around his plate. We would ask him something and he wouldn't answer. He just looked lost. And at one point in time, he just closed his eyes. Just closed his eyes. It was way too overwhelming. He couldn't locate where the voices were coming from. And it is also, research has shown that a person living with dementia will miss 1 out of 4 words spoken in a sentence. So you are trying to interpret all of this this information and you are missing key components of the conversation in itself. It is just not being absorbed and not comprehended. Um, and so a lot of times when you think someone hasn't heard something, you'll amplify your voice, to make sure that they hear you. But with someone living with dementia, it's not necessarily that they can't hear you, it's that it didn't get from, you saying it to their comprehension center within their auditory system. And so that is why you want to keep things short and sweet when you're talking to someone. Short, and if they don't understand something, I wouldn't necessarily recommend, taking what you said and trying to alter it completely, but maybe just repeating the same, short sentence over again. So that they can kind of fill in the missing pieces. Maybe the second time around, they can grab that word that was omitted the first time. So consider modifying playing light music or without lyrics, maybe, or no music at all. I had a gentleman that every night at dinner, he would not eat his food, just wouldn't. He would sit there. It wasn't until later on when everyone really had finished eating their food, and we thought it was something to do with that. So we just started talking about some of the different variables going on. And one of the ways that one of the days that he was more clear, I should say, and he was able to tell us what was going on. He said, I can't believe people are eating while the pianist is playing. And there was piano music playing, and we always had it playing. There was no lyrics, but there was just piano music playing in the background. But he would not touch his food because he thought it was disrespectful to do so while there was a piano player. He couldn't see the piano player. It was every single night that this was happening, but that was something that he grabbed onto and could not, eat during that time. He thought that was disrespectful. So that kind of opened our eyes to lyrics or no lyrics. Sometimes the music is just not needed. Having one conversation at a time. And this might be, we're going to go into environment here in a minute, but this might be something that you can change environmentally. Avoid slamming those cabinet doors. They can trigger that fight or flight response. And again, it takes 3 times as long for someone to kind of come down off of that. So the environment, and I chose this picture because I doubt anyone's holiday looks exactly like this. But this might be how someone living with dementia feels at a family gathering. Like they're surrounded by people they don't really recognize in uncomfortable situations, in an unfamiliar space, and there's a lot going on. There's different smells and people talking and things to see. And I know the introvert in me, this crowd gives me anxiety just looking at it. So, add in all of the other factors that we're talking about today, and just that's just the beginning part of, trying to alter the environment as much as you can for the holidays. And so, affected a person with dementia and just in aging in general, the sensory overload capacity is easier to hit. It's easier to hit that sensory overload. Um, you check those TVs with or without sound, radios, multiple conversations, all of those different components can affect someone's sensory overload capacity. Those blinking lights that we talked about. So consider modifying. Try to avoid, multiple sources of noise and activity. So for my family Christmas, we have a Christmas movie playing, Christmas music, people talking, people cooking. There's lots of different things going on all at the same time. And maybe being able to kind of take out some of those other pieces so that it's not part of the conversation. It's not part of a person's sensory environment. Also, to maybe provide us a quieter space for reduced stimulation. So we eventually got a smaller table out in a different room for my uncle to be eating with a couple of people that we know he felt comfortable with. A fun fact about my uncle was that as his disease progressed, he actually lost the ability to speak English. He went back to his native language of Italian. And so that was another component that we were trying to figure out. So at that quieter, reduced stimulated space, we only provided, people that were fluent in Italian within that space so that he was, more able to communicate if he wanted to. And a lot of times he didn't. He wanted to sit in silence and focus on eating his food. It seemed like that to us. We would try to start conversation and, there wasn't a lot of back and forth. So taste and smell, they are both affected. Both senses decline significantly. Smell does weaken with age, and taste buds change, preferences change. Um, Taste buds they don't regenerate as quickly, or at all. So taste buds will change completely as a person ages. Um, the sweet taste buds are easier to detect, while everything else is not as easy to detect. So a lot of times when you put something in your mouth and it's not sugary and sweet, they almost want to spit it out. What is this? It doesn't taste like anything. So I picture myself putting something in my mouth that has no taste whatsoever. What's the benefit for me to continue eating that? If I put a cookie in my mouth, I actually taste the sugary sweetness and I want to keep tasting that rather than something that has no taste at all. And so, on that note, food texture does matter. It matters highly for someone living with dementia. I had, someone that put a bite of mashed potatoes in their mouth and spit it out. When I asked, was that not good? I was just about to take a bite. Are you telling me I shouldn't? And just to kind of see what was going on with her, she said, I don't know, that ice cream is not cold. And I said, oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't eat warm ice cream either. That wouldn't be what I would want to be doing. Um, and so making sure that, instead of mashed potatoes for her from that point forward, we tried mashed potatoes again. It didn't work again. So then we did switch up to some different potato wedges, and she enjoyed those. So just modifying food choices, I think, is the number one thing, especially around the holidays. A lot of people are going to bring different types of foods to celebrations, and it might be difficult because someone has always liked something, but those preferences may have changed. So maybe adjusting those food choices, maybe ensuring that those textures are manageable. So if things are too tough, a person might spit them out. If they're too soft, they may not recognize the food and spit them out. Um, if Sometimes I've had people that put something in their mouth and they spit it out because they don't know how to chew it. So I had someone that put a grape in their mouth and swished it around their mouth, spit it out. What is that? That was scary. And not understanding and not knowing how to recognize the food. Is just something to consider. Sweets, again, are often preferred. So I like to talk about these two different food choices. And I understand some people might have their own preferences, but I want you to think about it from someone that's aging, their standpoint, or someone living with dementia and their standpoint. So drop in the chat which food choice which one looks more appealing to you? Which one feels less overwhelming? And put some things in the food in the chat. I'm gonna think about food the entire time now. Um, but I would I would say for me, I know that there's some really great staples in, the first option. There's corn in there, there's different potatoes, beans, different rice and things. But that to me is so overwhelming and might be extremely difficult for a person to try and, um, you know, navigate through. And so, some different types of food tips that I like to talk about, not only with dementia, but with a person that's aging as well, smaller portion sizes. Smaller is better. I would probably not even put two sandwiches on the plate. I would probably just put the one on the plate. Um, 2 to 3 food groups at a time. Sometimes I just would put one food at a time. At my family's holidays, we have all of the foods in the middle of the table, and you can kind of pick and choose what you'd like from there. And for my grandma and grandpa, we would make the plates for them so they wouldn't have to, and we would kind of put a little thing of everything, um, because, what would they like? What wouldn't they like? And what we've found is that if we just put like 2 to 3 food groups on there, then they'll eat those a lot more efficiently than if you just kind of pile on that plate. Also, just, having that, if you have a salad or a soup bowl, you're putting that in front of them without anything else. It's not a soup bowl and a salad, and then their meal is sitting, right in front of them. That's too overwhelming. So maybe one food at a time. Um, Temperature again can cause that food confusion. Um, it's important as a person ages, and fine motor skills and tactile motor skills are affected, that finger foods be available, and that be more of an independent and within that dignity realm of things. So, for instance, my uncle grew up on, Italian pastas and different things, and he couldn't manage his fork. In the middle to late stages of his disease process. And so every time that we would, make pasta and things, that's what he would want, of course. But trying to figure out how best to accommodate him in his here and now was actually we did a fried ravioli for him. And we had a marinara sauce next to it. And he took that with his hands, picked up his fried ravioli, dipped it in the sauce, and ate it. And so something along the lines of what he's always had, but kind of adapting it and modifying it to meet him where he was at. Um, Colorful food items that stand out on a plate will be a lot more appetizing to a person living with dementia, and also more recognizable. If I am looking at the slide in front of me, I know that those are French fries. I know that that's a sandwich. I'm not entirely sure of all of the different food items that are on, the under above the number one there. Um, and again, eating in a different space with less people and less noise. And desserts are okay. But again, I should say, any questions that you're having, are these foods okay? Are these desserts okay? These are all questions to track and ask your primary care physician. Um, Especially if you're have a loved one that you are concerned with calorie intake or nutrients and things, make sure that you're talking with your primary care physician about those concerns. So then we'll move into tactile and fine motor skills. Affected, of course, may not be able to utilize those utensils anymore, may need to eat with their fingers. There could be difficulty even holding wine glasses without tipping it. So try and modify some finger-friendly foods. Use easy to grip cups and glasses. Um, Avoid breakable glasses if possible. And keep the glass design similar to everyone else's. There are a couple of things that I have large pet peeves about, but one is to almost single a person out with those different choices. So I had and I'm coming from experience of having a family member that got almost like a sippy cup for my aunt at the table, and it was like she looked at it and was like, "What is that? I don't want that." And it was like my family member said, "Well, it's so you don't spill." It's like, well, no, we're actually going to do this all very differently. Making sure that the glass design was similar to everyone else. And again, you want to maintain that person's dignity. You want to maintain that they can be as independent as possible for as long as possible. Um, Balance and gross motor skills is our last sensory effect here. So what is affected? There's loose rugs, decor, presence on the ground that can be a tripping hazard. Last year, we had a pretty significant fall at our holiday from the train track that was running around the Christmas tree from my grandpa hooking his foot and having a pretty significant fall. Um, and that was just he didn't see it down there, which rightfully so. And those those things can create those tripping hazards that we don't foresee. The lack of chair arms can make sitting and standing difficult for a person. So consider modifying, remove those unnecessary rugs and floor decor. Provide chairs with arms for non for support, being able to get out of their chair or ease themselves into the chair safely. Chair arms are more necessary than we, I think, you know, think that they are. I've seen a person that can also get stuck in a chair. And so they go to sit in a chair and they're like, oh, grandma's been in that chair all night. Well, grandma can't get out of the chair. So making sure that she can get out and back in, she was almost, stuck in a position and she was too embarrassed to say, hey, someone help me. Um, Core strength, it dissipates the muscular abilities that a person has as a person ages as affected. And so thinking about all of those things top of mind is important for the holidays. Um, Having non-slip socks or house slippers for safety, and maybe it could be a gift for someone. Um, but also just this is one of my main tips is right when you walk in the door, just of someone else's house at the holidays, know that people might be kicking off their shoes and leaving them kind of wherever they kicked them off. And knowing that if you're walking in the front door or any door with someone living with dementia or someone that is aging, be cognizant of the fact that there are tripping hazards the minute that you can walk in the door, not only with a loose rug, but also those shoes right away. Okay, some holiday tips. And again, these holiday tips are, I try to put tips on every single presentation that I do. I want you to walk away with a possible tool to add to your toolkit. And so these might work for some people and might not work for other people. And you might need to modify them as you see fit. So, some quick tips, time of day. So, a person can experience sundowning when they're living with dementia, but also, like I think my kids experience sundowning. I think I experience sundowning. That is when a person, gets disoriented as the sun's going down. Emotions change. The disorientation can occur, and so with sundowning, as the sun begins to go down, a person will kind of feel lost, and making sure that you are going to a family gathering at a person's best time of day, I think is really important. And so maybe a family brunch would be better than, a 5:30 dinner and evening with family. And maybe, a couple of hours might be more fulfilling to that person than entire day spent with the family. So giving yourself the option as you're a caregiver to have that range of time for the time of day, looking at what's their best time of day. Is it in the morning? Yes, it is. Okay, how can we modify this holiday to accommodate our loved one? Um, some different safety modifications. In addition to those chairs and those rugs, consider the toilet. I know that's a weird statement, but consider the toilet. A lot of times people will be the most nervous about going into someone else's house and having incontinence issues. And um, bringing a toilet riser or a toilet, even arm bars for the toilet, which you can get at Walmart, you can get at Target, you can get at, CarePro or New Cara, different medical device stores. But those toilet risers can really help that feeling of anxiety when someone has to go to the bathroom. And it's something where you can even put the toilet riser or the grab bars behind the shower curtain in someone else's bathroom so that every time that you need to use it for yourself or your loved one, you can pull it out and utilize that and then put it back away. Um, and it was something that this was one of my favorite tips that we utilized in our family was because we had such issues around incontinence in bathrooms and that feeling of stress and worry. Once we introduced a toilet riser in the situation and really started planning for these events, that worry and anxiety dissipated. And what we would do is bring that in after everyone was already in and they were saying hello to everyone. We would almost like go in through the side door, go put that down and not make a big scene out of it. Um, Also, alcohol is something to talk about in the holiday season as well. Now, again, talk to your primary care physician if you have any questions about alcohol consumption, medication adverse reactions, a person's balance and coordination. But even limiting alcohol during the holidays, if a person is a fall risk, is important. Creating mocktails or something to make sure that person still feels included in on the social drinking aspect, but also maybe limiting or helping with that the fall risk aspect of it. I know my grandpa. He's having some cognitive issues, and we just went to a wedding, and he didn't notice, but we did switch his typical wine with a non-alcoholic version of a Cabernet, and he loved it. He said he loved that wine, and so that's what we had throughout the night. And I like to talk about making those modifications in the best interest of that person, in so that they feel independent and dignified throughout. It is not a malicious trickery of any sorts. But you are just looking out for that safety of the person. And again, if you need any assistance with, how to have that conversation or to have that conversation. I have resources at the very end of this presentation, but always going to your primary care physician for any medical needs. The next little bit that I like to include is just a letter to family and friends. This is something of all the presentations that I've given. This is something that most people have utilized and taken away because it's a really uncomfortable position to be in when you go to a family gathering and there are a lot of people that have questions about what's going on with mom or, husband or whomever that you are caring for. And how do we have that conversation without having to have it on the holiday in front of that person that's, experiencing, a cognitive or physical symptom. And how do we have that conversation? So we put together just a letter that you can send kind of ahead of time, if that's something that makes sense for you. And it just kind of prepares your loved ones for changes. And it gently explains kind of what family and friends might notice. It focuses on, you know, that recognition isn't as important as kindness throughout this situation, and to give practical guidance to that family member. Sometimes family pulls away or friends pull away because they don't know how to interact, what to say, what to do. They don't want to do anything wrong, and so they pull back. And so sometimes it's when you give them these practical ideas, these practical guidance, this open conversation and communication, it actually brings people closer together. They'll want to help, they want to be involved. You're giving them the tools in order to feel included and help with, mom or husband. So this letter really just sets a positive and inclusive tone, um, just meaning to be patient and understanding and to see the situation maybe with hope instead of sadness and maybe not talk about those things in front of that person or on that holiday, including a picture as well of just, this is, mom has lost a little bit of weight. This is what she's looking like now. Um, you know, we're she's using these high calorie drinks she doesn't really like, and just giving them these little tidbits of what's going on, caregiving wise, I think, is a difficult step to take. But once you take it, I've heard from a lot of people, there's a lot of relief going into that family gathering of, everyone not kind of pointing fingers or looking, and not having to have those conversations at your holiday as well as your loved ones. So, communication strategy. And again, this is something to just kind of let people know. Um, you'll want to approach a person living with dementia or someone that's having trouble with, their vision, from the front. Make sure that they see you before you just touch them. Again, you don't want to send them into that fight or flight. They'll, takes them 3 times as long to kind of come back from that. So making sure that you approach them from the front. Introduce yourself. This was something that felt foreign to me and my family because every time we give each other kisses, as we enter the room, when we leave the room, we give each other kisses, hugs. Um, you know, that was just something that we did, and we needed to alter that, because you went go up to my aunt right now, and even 2 years ago, she was, able to know who I was, or at least who I belonged to, her brother's daughter. And last year that was not the case. I walked up, she had no idea who I was. I introduced myself. I did say, hi, Aunt Judy. My name, my name's Janelle. I'm Chris's daughter. And my dad was right there. And she kind of nodded and said, "Oh, hi." And I reached my hand out, but she pulled her hand back. And so I knew at that point, okay, hugs are off the table, kisses are off the table. Those types of approaches and introductions can kind of clue you in on what steps to take next. I knew at that point, I put my hands together, in my own lap, and just, knew that that's the new trajectory of our conversation. We're not going to embrace that way unless initiates that. As we were leaving, she did put her hand on my hand, so I felt like that was a win. Um, and just knowing that each situation is different. So, even if you saw someone last week, and this week could be different, surrounded by a bunch of different people, could be a different situation. Um, Conversation direction. A lot of times, people will say, "Do you remember? Do you remember this? Remember when this happened?" And my, suggestion would be to kind of pull that back a little bit. We don't want it to feel like a quiz almost for that person. Um, you know, discussing and sharing memories of the past is always great. The long-term memories is what, people will mostly hold on to. So not asking, what did you eat? What did you eat today? And trying to, have conversation that way might not go where you would like it to go. And be okay sitting in silence together, I think was the hardest part for me. Just being okay to sit there and be there with that person in silence. Um, Try to avoid, pointing out mistakes, correcting them if they show any emotion, whether that be sadness, anger, fear. Correcting them or questioning them, it's okay. My aunt used to correct my uncle, when he used to call people the wrong names, and she'd be, "No, no, no, that's not them. It's, this person." And he kind of would be like, "I don't think so." And she'd be like, "No, it is. It's this person." And it would go back and forth. And at the end, they'd both be upset and agitated over that situation. So just knowing when to avoid the topics. And then one of my, again, biggest pet peeves is talking about a person as if they're not there. Please, please, please do not do this. Even if you think they may not be able to hear you, there's a chance that they can. They can hear you. So this is more of a slide to just talk about some different, statements that you could use when communicating plans. I use scripts all the time for myself, or, at if I am helping someone kind of navigate. And so sometimes it's helpful to have a starter. And so these are just helpful starters for communicating. There'll be a lot of people that say, let me know if I can help. And a lot of times you feel so overwhelmed as a caregiver, and I don't really kn there's probably so much that a person can do to help, but at the time, it's very overwhelming to try and ask someone for the help that you need, which for me, what I've heard from people, time, time is needed. Um, any availability, any comfortability that a person may have to keep them company or their loved one company, coming to the house, uh, giving gift cards for meal deliveries or house cleaning or something. Um, Even if they can't come to the house, maybe doing a weekly check-in text. That's a reasonable when someone says, let me know how I can help. Um, by having this slide here, I am telling you to think ahead of time and write them down. So when people are asking, how can I help? Let me know if I can do anything, that you say, actually, you can. This is how you can help. And pull up your message that you've put to yourself and say, I need someone to check in with me weekly if possible. I need, a text check-in or a quick call on a Saturday. Can you be that person for me? Um, I've had family members that live farther away say, how do you have things that you need to buy? You know, often, and they'll actually set up like auto deliveries for every month or something like that for a person. A lot of people will want to help. They just need to know how. And the caregiver, though, feels like they're almost overstepping if they're actually asking for help or actually answering that question. So my advice would be just to write things down so that you're not caught off guard when someone does ask, how can I help? This is just a large list of my recreation therapy really kicking in. But having different activities to do during the holiday, I'll only go through the very top one. One thing that we do at our family, we have photo albums. And along with that letter that went out to family and friends, letting them know what was going on, I also asked for help. Can you all send me a couple of pictures? They could be from any time, and have, you know, them put a label on the picture or send them via email and write a little summary of what's going on in that picture or a memory. And then I made them into a large photo album book. And that's what people were doing with my uncle while we were sitting at the holiday, is going through those photos. He was able to go through and pick out those people in the photos. If we hit any snags or, you know, had, myself or some of my cousins that didn't know those people in it, we could turn to the back of the page and kind of read the summary and be able to communicate that way. And it just gave a great talking point and a great memory to have. And so those are more of the activities listed here of how to ask for help from your family and friends, also to feel like they feel involved in, the planning of an activity during a holiday. So some different items to bring with. I'll always say, as a planner myself, I, plan and bring more and more with me each time. But you can keep things in the car, extra supplies, extra clothes, layered, comfy, not itchy, um, incontinence items. Sometimes we would bring two pairs of pants. We would bring extra socks, a wet bag, bathroom wipes. What we don't want is to, again, be caught off guard by an incontinence episode or spilling, not having extra clothes, someone being uncomfortable or needing to, leave prematurely. And just being prepared for those things to happen. A personalized cup for easy distinction and refills, and this could be more of a gift for that person. Again, it's not to, have like in the situation I was explaining earlier, not a sippy cup for someone at the table, but something like this where they can have a personalized cup maybe with their name on it. And you can kind of make sure that they're drinking throughout the long holiday. Um, Having a couple favorite snacks of a person. Again, you don't know how dinner is going to go. If we knew that my uncle would be eating golden Oreos and Mountain Dew like it was his job. And so we would bring just extras with us, just to get those calories in there. And there were a lot of times where he didn't eat, my grandma's made from scratch lasagna, but he would eat his golden Oreos and his Mountain Dew after. Making sure you have tissues, chapstick, lotion, just things to make people feel comfortable, and packing different medication, any required meds, and extra doses for any delays that you may encounter. I have these car transportation tips in here because I've heard a lot of people that say the holiday isn't what stresses me out the most. It's getting, dad to and from the house. So here are some different car transportation tips. There's number one, I think, is just having a car that's lower to the ground. You don't have to try and throw someone into, a pickup. Having a swivel car cushion, there's some that lock then at the front so that they don't keep like swiveling in the front seat or anything. And then car seat extenders, yeah, seatbelt extenders, I'm sorry. And then there is this called a handy bar, which we've used so many times before. There's a little notch that is in most of the car doors, and you can kind of just hook that silver end in there, and it can kind of help someone get themselves out of the car with your assistance as well. And of course, I have some holiday gifts here, just some suggestions, gifts for the person living with dementia, some practical gifts that uh, may be helpful for where that person is at now, and some different gifts for the caregivers themselves, because equally as important to have some different gifts to help out those caregivers, shower chairs, medicine, uh, dispensers, orientation clocks, telephones, whiteboards, navigational lights to go in the plugs to help someone guide them into a bathroom at night. So I just wanted to say I want to give you all permission that it is okay if you visit earlier in the day or skip the large gatherings. It is okay if you limit the time to a shorter time and really put a hard line in there. Um, it's okay if you celebrate before or after the actual holiday. Um, and it is okay if you enjoy yourself too. It's your holiday as well. And your main goal is to be there for the people that you love. And you are doing that even by coming to this presentation to learn more. You're doing everything you can to make sure that they have just as great of a holiday as you do. So I just wanted to reiterate that the holidays are a stressful time. It's filled with unreasonable expectations. Everyone wants this Norman Rockwell type holiday happening, and it's just not realistic. There's a lot of pressure, guilt, and shame that we put on ourselves as caregivers. And just to know you're not alone, even though a lot of the times aging feels very lonely. And so I wanted to highlight kind of what we do here at the Somay Center. First and foremost, we have different access to resources. We have different ties to the community and engagement. We have Jen, who does nothing but community outreach and programming and education with the community, and that's at a local, state, and national level. We want to give caregivers support, and so we have caregiver support groups. We have those resources readily available. We have networking opportunities and aging education as well here at the Somay Center. And so I just put some different resources at the back. So I've got the Somay Center there, Dementia Haven, which was the company that I had founded. And I have resources on that website for people as well. I give education and consulting to people and communities, mostly senior living communities, where I can kind of hit a larger audience. AARP Iowa, the Triple A's, the Alzheimer's Association, the state of Iowa has the Health and Human Services Division, which focuses also on aging and disabilities. And then Essence of Life Hospice, I wanted to pinpoint this hospice in particular. They have an upcoming Grief and the Holidays support group. And I think that's just really important to talk about in addition to, how to alter and modify our holiday season, but also dealing with the grief and whether that be over a loss of a loved one or anticipatory grief. You're, anticipating losing that loved one or how things will change. I think it's really important to talk about this and to continue to support one another. Okay. I just want to thank you for attending.